I've made no secret of the fact that I hate vibe coding. I think it's a waste of time and it's for idiots with more token credits than sense. If you're not familiar with the term, vibe coding is the process of attempting to build an insecure and ugly application by just giving into the vibes. Knowing how your application works is for dorks. But no, I'm joking, of course. Your application won't work. But this week I stumbled upon a new term that's apparently gaining traction, and it really resonated with me because it addresses the key issue with AI coding, and that is context. The new buzzword is context engineering, and the weapon of choice for today's video will be Claude Code. I messed around with Claude Code a few days ago, and I asked it to build me a Next.js web application to log my gym sessions. I was basically just asking for a CRUD app because my hopes were not high. But I was super interested because this codebase does something important that vibe coders don't. Claude Code has this concept of a P, which is the AI version of the product's requirements document that product managers know and love, but instead of a P or D, it's a P, product requirements prompt. You see, context engineering has loads of potential to basically structure a repo such that all the really important information is in all the right places. There's the P folder, and in here you can actually structure things in such a way that, for example, you could start with a template, and you could include a whole bunch of information about the way that you want your code to look and work. And what I really like about this is that you can add as much context as you're capable of adding. And professionals in this space have been saying for a while that the more engineering knowledge you have, the better you're going to be at AI coding. And then what you can do is you can actually just go ahead and build P in a way that makes sense. One way that you could do this might be to have a PRP for each feature. And in this PRP, you even have references to documentation. So Claude can just go on the web, grab the documentation. This will really cut down on hallucinations. Now, Claude.md, that's just another markdown file. The whole point of these is that they're human readable. And this is the entry point. So this is what you'll originally tell Claude. For example, the first thing you're going to do is go into this other file, initial.md, and read that. But there are a few other base level constraints, such as I want you to write tests for all of my code. I also want you to break things down by tasks and complete each one. And I want you to use particular styles. Granted, there are a few things here that never hallucinate. I mean, that's not exactly going to work for an LLM, but it's worth including anyway. It might cut down on hallucinations. So the AA model will read this, then it'll be told to move on to initial, then it'll go through these other considerations. It'll look through the examples, it'll look through the docs. By the way, note that I've actually told it to use Next.js. I've also told it to use Tailwind and ShadCN, but actually I didn't tell it to use Prisma, and it didn't tell it to use NextAuth. It did that by itself. And that's the funny thing. I actually provided an example of these initial files. I didn't write this. So the whole point of this is that you can actually use the LLM to incrementally build up your code base, but not in some random vibe coded way, in a way that you are constantly tweaking the documentation and using the LLM to do those tweaks. But every now and again you come in and you say, oh, wait a second, I don't want this. This is ridiculous. Get rid of it. That way you get on top of your own code base and it's not just a whole bunch of random, unstructured, insecure, untested code. You're actually putting these files in place to safeguard your code and make sure the LLM does as well as it can. Now, obviously, this isn't going to be perfect, but I really think it's a huge step forward when it comes to AI coding. So now, note there's no Next.js, there's no Node modules, there's no JavaScript in here at all. It's just a bunch of markdown files. But in the .claude folder, you can actually have commands, and these commands can be run by Claude Code. And so one is to execute the PRP, the other is to generate new PRPs. It's a command, but it's just a bunch of text, so it's just a contextual command. And Claude Code is a terminal thing, so you'll actually run this in the terminal. And you can pass things like arguments. There are certain keywords in Claude. It's not just a bunch of random text. Okay, now, as I said before, this is actually a project that I was messing around with earlier this week. I just want to show you the output that I came up with real quick, and then I'm going to move into Flutterflow and do an actual session with Claude Code. So basically, I ran it once and it generated all of these files. This is a full Next.js application. I used Next.js a while ago before I moved into Flutterflow. I'm not really familiar with the latest changes with it. It's really evolved a lot in the last couple of years, but it is super popular. And that's why I chose it for this project, because there's going to be a huge amount of training data for Next.js. Now, when I ran it for the first time, I actually did have an error that I had to go in and solve myself. And that was annoying. I was thinking, oh, there's just going to be a whole bunch of errors now. This context engineering thing isn't going to work out. It's like vibe coding. However, I took 5 or 10 minutes and I went ahead and fixed the error just to see, and then I tried running it again, and this was the result. Now, I gotta say, this is cool. I was assuming that it would just be broken and it wouldn't work properly, but to be honest, it actually works perfectly. I'm able to put in my reps and everything. I didn't really bother doing any of this, and to be honest, there's no database here. I don't even know how it actually works in terms of the database. I think there's some kind of caching layer going on in here. But it's actually, I've been able to remember my different workout entries from multiple different days, and I can go in. As I said, it's just a CRUD app, but this all came out of one prompt. I didn't actually do any work here at all. It even has working search function. Honestly, I was really blown away by how good this is. And if you've seen my other videos, you'll probably get the impression that I'm a bit of an AI skeptic, which I kind of am. I mean, yeah, I use AI every day, but for building entire applications, it never even seemed close to ready. The truth is that this context engineering exercise really blew me away. But here's the thing. When you tell an LLM something vague and it comes back with something good, that's a win and everything, but you're really just playing into the LLM's strengths. It can draw on working code in its training data and put together something that's been done 100 times. The real challenge is when you give it an established code base. So now I'm going to export a whole Flutterflow project into VS Code and try to make some simple tweaks. I want to see what Claude and context engineering can come up with when it's heavily constrained. Okay, now what I've done is I've downloaded my Flutterflow code base into VS Code, and then I added in the markdown file. So now I have this .claude commands folder. I've got execute PRP. I also have initial, and I have Claude MD. So when I run the application, it looks like this. And the idea here is that I can go into, say, jogging, and then I can say, yeah, I did this habit for today, and I get a little animation, and then I'm starting to collect some statistics about my jogging habit. Now, when the habit has come overdue, there's this ugly red box around it. And the first thing I want to try and get Claude to do is to see if it can modify this red box, give it a little bit of freedom, but constrain it to only change the design of this red border. So for that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a PRP. And to create a PRP, I use slash commands in Claude, and I'll use the slash command generate PRP. And then here's a prompt. And remember, this isn't some vibe coded prompt where it will go and start generating code. This is only supposed to generate the PRP. And the idea is to just basically take a look at the red border and see if it can come up with something better. So I'll execute that and I'll see if it correctly creates the PRP file. And you see, again, what it's doing is it's updating things like the to-do lists, and it's going through each one according to what it's been told to do in Claude MD and Initial MD. It's literally going through a checklist that it has been told to do, and it will do this every time because it will always go through the Claude MD, Initial, the commands, all of these things in a structured way. That's what I'm really liking about context coding. So I'm about 2 minutes in now. It's doing some pretty interesting things. It's actually going on the web and it's searching things like Flutter UI design, overview origin states, material design, shows gradients. It's doing a lot of stuff that I suppose I would probably want to rein in because it's maybe being too expressive and it's basically using too many tokens for things that probably aren't necessary. So that's one thing to watch, I would say. Still, I am pretty curious as to what it comes up with. Okay, I've successfully created a comprehensive PRP, and it's sitting there inside of the PRPs directory, overdue habit UI enhancement. And it's giving me this nice breakdown with the documentation, validation, and even a confidence score of 9 out of 10. So it thinks at least that it's got almost everything I need. So let's take a look at the file itself. The first thing to note is that these titles, they actually come from the base. Inside of the template, I've got this PRP base. And so it's sort of using this as a template and filling things out. We've got our goal, transform the current red border for overdue habits into a visually appealing prominent design. You see, I gave it a bit of a prompt and then it kind of created a better prompt from my prompt using these templates and context. It even has success criteria and documentation. It's even going into Medium articles and looking to see if it can get a really nice card. It's not doing random things. It really is thinking these things through. And then it even actually has context for the specifics of the styling, and it's going into fine details about the way that containers should be built, the way box shadows should happen. And remember, this isn't code. This is actually still just the PRP. So at this point, you definitely would want to go through, and especially for a real production application, and say, does this make sense? Do I understand this? If I don't, I'll get the AI to explain it to me more. But this here, this is exactly what we can either choose or not to choose to blindly follow. If you have no experience with development, well then your app is probably not going to be that great, but it would be a real superpower to understand all of this about software engineering, get better at it as you go along. And then the guardrails that context engineering gives you will permit you to just keep leveling up your skills with AI coding. I really like the idea here. The question is it going to work? This is a really simple task that I gave it. So let's go ahead and execute the PRP. And it's going to be this in overdue habit UI enhancement MD. Let's go. Again, it's thinking things through. It's looking at the PRP file. It's reading through it. It's having another think. By the way, Claude Code has different levels of thinking, from thinking up to ultra thinking. There's actually different levels of reasoning that you can give it. And the difference obviously is that ultra think is going to be really considering absolutely everything, and it's going to be far more expensive and use far more tokens. So you got to find that balance between token usage and results. All right, we are done, and I have the app running again. Now, before I take a look, I just want to point out, I've pressed Control-C and then Control-C again to get out of Claude. And it gives me a little summary. And one really, really important thing to check about the summary is the cost. Now, I've made one small edit to my app. It took, I'd say, about 5 minutes. And the total cost of it was $1.60. That is not cheap for one tiny little tweak to an application. Now, it's also telling me what models it used. It used 3.5 Haiku and Claude Sonnet. And now let's see what it came up with. Okay, wow, puke. You know, in all fairness, it technically did what I told it to do. It's a very subjective thing to say, hey, could you make this look a bit prettier? It did add some shadow. It did change the colors. Yeah, I mean, it technically did what I told it to do. It's just that maybe my prompting wasn't good enough in terms of describing the UI that I wanted. And admittedly, I didn't really know what UI I wanted anyway. I'm going to call this one inconclusive. It didn't break the application. It still works just fine. And honestly, I think that's a win for an AI coding. Now I want to try something a bit more nuclear. Let's really push this thing to the limit. But very important before I do that, we're going to start initializing Git. Now, Git's not really that complicated. It can go really deep, but oh man, it is so important that you're using it. When I initialize a new repository, it's going to give me a new folder called .git. VS Code is going to go into this green. And what it wants me to do is add everything to it. You'll also need a git ignore file because right now it's adding things that it really shouldn't be adding. But basically you want to go git commit and take a snapshot of where you are. And actually, once I've done that, another thing that I want to do is create a new branch, give the branch a better name than what I've done. And then now, whatever I do to this code base at this point, it's only going to go into the gigantic feature branch. And if I'm happy with the changes that I made to the gigantic feature branch, then I can merge that back into main. Or I can go back into main here and make changes on main. I can make other branches. It's really, really important to get comfortable with the basics of Git. Anyway, let's go back to Claude Code and start messing around again. Now, this time let's generate a much more interesting PRP. And this time I'll use this prompt. This time I want to create a custom widget, and it's going to be for the date picker. So that's this guy here. When I go into the onboarding flow, and there's a date picker here, and that's like the default Flutterflow date picker, which honestly I don't love. I don't really like the Cupertino style one either. So maybe it would be really cool to have a custom picker. The other thing is that one thing I overlooked in this application as I was building it is that if I initialize this onboarding flow, the date picker actually doesn't pick up the correct date as its initial value from the page state. And I want to tell Claude that I'd like it to pick whatever's in the page state and use that as the initial value. Great, once again, we got our new PRP custom date picker. So let's go for it with that. By the way, while that's running, I just want to point out that this actually has turned green in VS Code. And that's Git. Git is telling us, hey, this is a new file. So this is a very detailed PRP. And this is, I think, a really powerful concept, making these PRPs in this way. And yeah, that was kind of a lot of tokens just for one file, but let's see what it comes up with. Great, so my new feature has finished building. Now, check this out. This is really cool. It actually makes the tests. And this is so important from the point of view of context engineering, because Unlike with vibe coding, it's actually putting together a whole bunch of tests and then running those tests as it builds out the new feature. This is basically TDD, test-driven development. It writes a bunch of tests and then they fail, and then it builds the feature and it iterates until the tests are passing. Now, of course, this depends a lot on the quality of the tests, but just the fact that it's trying to do this is such a huge step forward for AI coding. So now we've got lib, we've got components, and we have our new custom component. Let's see, we got Cupertino picker theme. Okay, so there's a theme file, there's a model file, and there is the widget itself. Pretty cool. Oh, and also, let's see how much it costs. Okay, $278. This feature cost $278. That's still less than an engineer. But this is real money, and I think it's kind of going to be hard for people to learn context engineering and experiment and learn how to do it right when the costs are like this. This is fun for me, just kind of messing around, building one feature, but in fairness, if you spent a whole month, you'd probably have to get on the Claude Code $200 a month plan, which is not realistically affordable for everyone. They also have a $20 a month plan. I'm not sure how many tokens you can get for that, but I'm definitely going to look into it. Anyway, this is Git status. So it's added a whole bunch of new stuff. Now I can do a git add to add all of the new files. And then I can apply a commit for adding my new Cupertino style date picker. And that means that now all of these new files are part of the Git history. And so if I went back to git main, then all of those files disappear and I'm back to where I was. And the other new files that I've created, they don't exist anymore. So this way, if the AI does anything at all that you don't want to keep, you can actually just roll back to where you were using Git. This is so, so important. Anyway, back to our gigantic feature. This is our new widget. You know what? We should rename this now. Git branch -m. And we'll call it Cupertino Date Picker. That's a better name for this branch. So now I have two branches, Cupertino Date Picker and main. All right, let's go and have a look. I'm afraid my dreams of a one-shot feature are quelled, so we're gonna have to slap this error back into Claude and see if it can come up with a solution. Looks like it thinks it's found the issue. Okay, so it thinks it was just a small import issue. Let's see if it was right. I mean, in Claude Code's defense, even a senior developer is not going to write an entirely new feature and have it run first time with no errors. Well, it looks like it's running. Okay, let's check it out. Go to Gym, go to Update, and let's fingers crossed and check if this new date picker is going to appear. Oh, cool. It's ugly, but it actually did work. This is definitely a Cupertino style date picker. So yeah, I'm pretty happy with that. The AI just built an entire new Flutter feature. And I asked for blue with that one. And for this one, I asked for red. Oh, nice. I mean, I would definitely tweak the style here, but that's a style thing. That's just going to be a personal preference thing anyway. The last thing that I asked it to do was to make sure that it populates itself. So if we say the time of day, that's the due by, is 2:07, I want 2:07 to appear when I open this thing. Nope, I was so close. It's 3:20 p.m. right now, so it's actually still not implemented this extra feature. That's okay. I still think it's a really big leap that it was able to build this Cupertino style date picker. This really does imply that you can write code with Claude and have it run. And with this context engineering principle, you can keep iterating on these things and it's not going to break your old code, which is the really, really big thing about vibe coding. So, final verdict. Yep, context engineering is awesome. It's actually not that I'm impressed with what it built, but rather the approach that Claude Code took to build it. It didn't just spit out random code and brute force it until it worked, which, to be honest, seems to be what vibe coding is all about. Rather, it took a measured approach. It used the context of the whole code base. It created tests. It ran the tests with each iteration. It searched the web for best practices and inspiration, which was really cool, and gradually informed itself of its own context. I think context engineering has a future. My only concern is the cost. I spent between $4 and $5 on this one small feature in my Flutter code base. That's not a sustainable way to work unless you have a company footing the bill. It's cheaper than an engineer who isn't using AI, yeah, but you also need to employ a context engineer. So if you don't have any coding knowledge and you don't care to learn it, you will get bad results. And I could see that my own inexperience, specifically with this technique, was the reason why my widgets were looking pretty ugly and not quite what I was envisioning. This context engineering thing will take skill, and I think that's awesome. There should be room for skill in the AI age. I think soon the AI bubble will burst and the AI fog is going to clear. And if I had to bet today on what skill is probably still going to be around when that happens, I really like context engineering. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.